Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Harrogate series. Harrogate is a large borough, one of the 11 districts of North Yorkshire. It's got 139 civil parishes. Which one are we in this episode? Welcome back to Harrogate once again, people, where the weather is now starting to turn quite sunny, which is a good thing. It was raining a little bit earlier, wasn't it, in previous episodes, but hopefully now it's going to stay nice and dry, fingers crossed. So we've got a nice big village to walk around here, right on the outskirts of Ripon. Behind me there is a big farmhouse. We'll see plenty of those in this episode. We'll also see a very interesting church which has got a tale to tell involving some Bellringers that came from elsewhere in the country. It's one of those tales that you just sort of have to tell when you come to a place such like as this. Welcome to the parish of Sharrow. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like, and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Sharow, Boundary Hill Spur. Here's a nice village. Of all the ones I've visited on this current run around Ripon, this one's got to be my favourite so far. This is Sharrow, which lies on a hillside just to the east of the city. It's one of those places which people drive through to get to somewhere else, but they really have no idea what they're missing out on. Sharrow is a great little village, packed with history at every turn, and even has some unusual tales to tell. Sometimes recorded as Sharrow with 2 R's as opposed to 1, this small community has a social history which can be traced back to the 12th century. It has associations with an astronomer, the World Heritage Site of Studley Royal, and a man who founded a major name in motorsport. As if that wasn't enough, Sharrow was often frequented by Lewis Carroll, who visited a house here called Fair Lawn. It was also the birthplace of George Nicholson, who went on to be the curator of the Royal Botanical Gardens in Kew. Landmarks-wise, Sharrow has a school, a sports ground, a much-loved but closed village pub, and a church, which hit the headlines in 2011 for a really unusual reason. The churchyard also has one of the most amazing graves we've ever seen. So come with me around it and let's learn about it all. I promise this one has way more than meets the eye. We start on Sharrow Lane, right at the far eastern end of it, where the road runs into a public footpath that goes to Copt Hewick. Sharrow Lane is the oldest part of this village, and it doesn't take long to realise that fact. Even though it has several new builds along its length, the majority of it is made up of dwellings and farmhouses that go back centuries. Sharrow Hall is to the south of this road, a large private country house that was built in the late 1700s. Blue heritage plaques are plentiful here too. Here's one at the old village pump, which was restored by the parish council in 2002. After reading about Sharrow Hall, I felt it deserved a bit more than just a passing mention. Although now one of the largest single houses in the village, Sharrow Hall hasn't always been such a grand property. Early records from the mid-18th century describe a much smaller house occupied by a blacksmith called Ralph Smithson. In 1791 it was sold to James Gilbertson, a Ripon clockmaker. Gilbertson made money by exchanging clipped 1 guinea coins for less than their true value in gold and renamed his new property Light Guinea Hall. There's still a Light Guinea cottage today on the Sharrow Hall estate. At some point thereafter, Light Guinea Hall became known as Sharrow Lodge and was sold to John Fairgray, the innkeeper of the Unicorn in Ripon Marketplace. He would go on to be the mayor of Ripon, and his portrait still hangs in the town hall. Sharrow Lodge was next purchased by John and Catherine Cayley, who came from Brompton near Scarborough. John Cayley was the son of Sir George Cayley of Brompton Hall. His nephew was another Sir George, better known to many historians as the father of flight. Catherine died in 1823 and is buried along with her husband in Ripon Cathedral. 3 months after her will was proved, Septimus Hodson purchased Sharrow Lodge at an auction held in the Unicorn. He lived in it for 8 years before the Hopper Powell family came along in 1834. They would command Sharrow Lodge for the longest period in single-family ownership, remaining residents until after World War II. Incidentally, during World War I, the property was divided into 2 parts, one for the family, the other for a girls' school, which had been evacuated to Sharrow from Leeds. At some point during their tenure, Sharrow Lodge became Sharrow Hall. Many of the family are interred in a family vault at St John's Church, which we'll come to later, and several of the monuments and gifts to the parish church were donated by the Powell's descendants. In 1952, the hall was put on the market and snapped up by Timothy Lucas, a racehorse owner whose colours were first carried by a filly which ran in the Sharrow Plate race at Ripon Racecourse. His son was Charles Lucas, who had a passion for racing too, only his involved wheels and engines as opposed to horses. He was known to many well-respected motorsport figures, including the late Frank Williams. Charles Lucas founded Titan Motorsport, which fielded teams of single-seater racers for many years. Lucas sold Sharrow Hall in 1997, and shortly after, in 2004, the present owners came along. For such a small country house in a mostly unknown village on the outskirts of Ripon, Sharrow Hall has quite the backstory. Let's get Sharrow marked off our Harrogate list. We can do that here thanks to a notice board just beyond the hall. Job done. Sharrow Lane continues, and from this point onwards the land under our feet starts to undulate. First it's downhill slightly into a shallow valley, but then it's a steep uphill climb again. On the way is the Half Moon, a 200-year-old pub. Although it's been closed for 5 years now, a community group which sees it as a vital community asset aim to revive this pub. It's an ongoing saga which even has its own Facebook page. I've linked it below for you to have a read. St John's House next. This served as Sharrow's vicarage until 1977, when it became the residence of the Archdeacon of Richmond, the Venerable Paul Burbridge. On the other side of the road shortly after is the Mill House. This has a blue plaque which I'm pointing out to you here. That tells you the property was the location of a horse engine house. Sometimes known as Yorkshire wheel houses, animals were used to turn mill wheels inside them that ground corn. Not far away is another blue plaque, found next to one of Sharrow's 2 wells or springs, which were located along this main street. Over the way is a third blue plaque, this one marking the site of the former pinfold on the corner of Lowfield Lane. Sharrow Lane now starts to climb steeply, but to complete the trek up the hill, we're taking a shortcut via a footpath to Dishforth Road. This part of Sharrow was historically known as Kelcar and later became Keldale. The Keldale name still lives on thanks to Keldale Terrace, Keldale Gardens and Keldale Villa, a massive 3-storey property on Dishforth Road. Now a 4-bedroomed house, it was formerly occupied by an independent nursery. Now we've crossed the road and we're into the sports ground. Sharrow Cricket Club play here. Nobody knows for sure when they were formed, but the earliest record of the club dates back to 1919, when they played a match against Burton Leonard. The well-used village hall forms part of their ground these days. If you stand next to the village hall, you'll see 2 massive buildings. The one on the left is Sharrow Cross Villa, a 4-bedroomed house worth almost £1 million. On the right is a nursing home called the Coach House. Mail coaches heading for Ripon would often pass through Sharrow. Okay, so now we find ourselves on the end of Church Close, and there are 2 major landmarks here. One of them is Sharrow School, which you might be able to see behind me there, and the other one is the church, the tower of which you definitely can see just there. Now, the church has got an interesting tale to tell involving some bell ringers. A few years ago, they got locked inside or barricaded inside the belfry, and it was only on the efforts of a passerby that they were able to be freed. It's an interesting tale, and it's one that you can find, you know, all the information about online. I'll do my best to tell it here though. So this is Berrygate Lane, which connects Dishforth Road to the A61. A lot of local traffic uses this as a shortcut. There are two main landmarks along here. One of them is Sharrow Primary School. Records of a school in Sharrow only go back as far as 1825, when Elizabeth Sophia Lawrence of Studley Royal donated a small schoolroom to Sharrow along with some other buildings, including the parsonage. The modern building is linked to the church, which is literally next door. Dedicated to St John the Evangelist, this gained eco-status in 2017, the fifth one in the Diocese of Leeds to do so. St John's was designed by civil engineer George Knowles, built in 1825 and extended in 1877. Its nave is constructed mainly in sandstone with magnificent windows, and the tower contains 8 bells, which are often rung. It was thanks to the bells that this church hit the headlines in 2011. A group of bell ringers visiting from Oxfordshire were locked in the tower by an irate local, purely because of the noise they were creating. They were released when a passerby was alerted to their predicament. Nobody knows who the angry local was, but honestly, I think they were just a bit mardy. The churchyard features this very unusual tomb. This pyramid is the final resting place of the British astronomer Charles Piazzi Smythe. He was known for many innovations in his field, but along with his wife Jessica, his most famous work centred around the pyramidological and metrological studies of the Great Pyramid of Giza. That explains the shape of his tomb. Despite his bad reputation in Egyptology circles today, Smythe performed much valuable work at Giza, including the most accurate measurements of the Great Pyramid that any explorer had made up to and including his time. Well, that's one thing I certainly didn't expect to see. Who says you have to go to Egypt to see the pyramids? Just come to Ripon, they build them here. Okay, we're almost done with the walk. Now we're going to go across the road out of the churchyard and take a left turn back onto the main road again and basically just complete the circuit of Sharrow. There's a few more streets to see. It's mainly all residential though, so let's see what's left for us. Yeah, it's true, there's not a lot left now. Opposite the church is a car park and this playground, and if you use the path through this, you're back onto Dishforth Road. Kelldale Villa is away to the right this time. We've come all the way around it. We're about to pass a street called Glebe Meadow. A modern estate, this is built on what used to be just a field. However, through that field ran Back Lane. Reduced now to just a footpath off New Road, Back Lane led to the farmhouse where this walk began. Only the other end of it remains as a road, a dead end, with a handful of dwellings. And this is New Road, which takes you back to Sharrow Lane and completes the circuit of the village. Now, interestingly, I'm walking down here and I'm thinking to myself, there's a group on Facebook which would probably appreciate this road. Let me just show you what the camera can see right now. There you go. Now, the group in question is called the Country Lane Appreciation Society. I think they'd be all over this because it looks absolutely beautiful, doesn't it? They do appreciate a good country lane, and I think this one is definitely in the upper echelons of what they deem to be desirable, I think. I don't know. I don't make the rules. They do, apparently. So yeah, there you go. If you want to join that group, then go and join it. Me though, for now I'm done with Sharrow and I'm off to the next one. So yeah, let's go around the corner, find the car and leave this one behind. As we drive away up Sharrow Lane, look to the right and you might see the remains of a stone cross. That's a boundary marker of the sanctuary of Ripon, the only one that now remains. The rest have been destroyed. The cross is looked after now by the National Trust and it has a little information board next to it. That's it for Sharrow, but again, there will be more on the sanctuary in future episodes. Join me next week as we start to work our way back again towards Boroughbridge. Thanks Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.